It was 2:37 a.m. when my phone rang. Not the normal ringtone, this one was wrong. The sound was deep, hollow, echoing like it was coming from a cave. I blinked at the glowing screen. No name, no number, just the word, unknown. I should have let it ring, but instead I swiped to answer. Hello? For a moment there was nothing but static. Then a voice came through, low, raspy, wet. We've been waiting for you. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. Who is this? The voice chuckled. It didn't sound human. You answered. That means you accept. Accept what? The call cut off. I sat there in the dark of my small apartment in Portland, Oregon, my own breath loud in my ears. The room suddenly felt colder. I got up, checked the hallway. Nothing. Checked the locks. Everything secure. When I finally tried to sleep, I dreamed of ringing phones. Hundreds of them. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. Made coffee. Told myself it was a prank. But when I stepped out into the hallway, my neighbor was standing there. His name was Mr. Peterson, a retired truck driver in his 60s. He never talked to anyone. But today, he looked right at me and said, "You shouldn't have picked up that call, Jason." I froze. What? But he just shook his head and walked away, muttering something under his breath. That night the phone rang again. Same time. Same sound. I let it ring. After the fifth ring, I unplugged the phone completely, but then I heard it. The ringing wasn't coming from the phone anymore. It was coming from inside the walls. Soft. Muffled. I plugged the phone back in and answered. "You can't ignore us," the voice said. "You're already marked." For the next 3 days, the calls came at random times. Morning, noon, 3 a.m. Sometimes I'd hear heavy breathing. Sometimes someone whispering my name, sometimes screaming. And then came the message, "Meet us where it all began." I didn't know what that meant, until I remembered the old gas station outside Tillamook near the Oregon coast. There used to be a payphone there when I was a kid. It had been shut down years ago after a fire. At midnight, I drove out there. The Pacific Highway was empty, fog rolling in from the coast. When I reached the gas station, the payphone light was on. That shouldn't have been possible. I got out of the car. The night was silent. No wind, no insects, just that ringing. Slow, hollow. When I stepped inside the booth, it smelled like wet earth. The receiver was cold when I picked it up. "You're late," the voice said. "Who are you? What do you want?" The voice laughed. "Step outside." I turned and froze. Something was out there. Tall, thin, its outline barely visible in the fog. Its eyes glowed red. I tried to leave, but the booth door wouldn't open. I pulled harder. Nothing. The figure moved closer. Its footsteps echoed, slow and heavy. Then the glass of the booth turned black like someone poured ink over it. I couldn't see out. "Where am I?" I shouted. The voice on the phone said, "You're exactly where you need to be." Then the floor opened beneath me. I fell, not like a short drop. This was endless. The air was burning hot. I smelled ash, and faintly, something like blood. When I landed, it was on black soil. The sky above was red, glowing like fire. All around me, hundreds of phones were ringing. Old rotary phones, cell phones, payphones, all ringing at once. Figures moved in the shadows, their shapes human, but wrong. Too tall, too thin. One of them approached me. He wore a torn suit, his face blank and smooth. He held out a phone to me. "Answer," he said. I shook my head. "Answer," his voice boomed, shaking the ground. I lifted the phone. On the other end, I heard my own voice, crying, begging for help. And then I heard hundreds of other voices join in, screams, pleas. I looked around and saw other people arriving, falling out of the darkness like I had. Some were on their knees, some were already answering phones. And then I understood. This was hell. Not fire and brimstone, but endless calls, endless voices. And I was one of them now. Sometimes when it's quiet, I still hear my apartment phone ringing. Faint. Far away. I wonder who will answer next. And when they do, maybe I'll be the one whispering on the other end. Story End 2. I had been out of work for 6 months when I saw the job listing, a caretaker position, posted on a small-town community board online. The pay was ridiculously high for what it described. Caretaker needed, isolated property, light maintenance, keep logs, stay overnight. It almost sounded too easy. I called the number and an older man answered on the second ring. His voice was slow, tired like he hadn't slept in days. "You're interested?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "What exactly would I be taking care of?" "Just keep watch," he said. "That's all. Just stay there and keep watch." The job was in rural Montana, about 40 miles from the nearest town. I drove out there the next day, through miles of dirt roads and forest until my GPS lost signal completely. By the time I reached the property, the sun was setting and the temperature had dropped. The house was old, 3 stories tall, sitting alone in a clearing. Its windows were black, like eyes staring out into the wilderness. The man who had answered the phone was waiting on the porch. His name was Daniel. He was tall, thin, with a gray beard and deep wrinkles. "You're late," he said, even though I was right on time. He led me inside. The interior smelled faintly of smoke and something else I couldn't place. Iron, maybe, or rust. The furniture was covered with sheets, except for a single chair by the fireplace. "You'll keep a log every hour," Daniel said, handing me a notebook. "Write down what you hear, what you see. Don't leave the house after dark. Don't answer the knocks." "What knocks?" I asked. He looked at me for a long time before answering. "You'll know." And then he left, just like that. He got in his truck, headlights cutting through the fog, and drove away down the dirt road until I couldn't see him anymore. The silence was absolute. At 10 p.m., I wrote my first entry. All quiet, wind in the trees, floor creaks when I walk. At 11, I wrote, "Heard something outside, like footsteps. Too slow for an animal." Midnight came, and with it, the first knock. 3 slow knocks on the front door. I froze, notebook in hand. My first instinct was to check through the window, but I remembered what Daniel had said. "Don't answer the knocks." I stayed perfectly still, heart pounding. The knocking stopped after a minute. At 1:15 a.m., I heard something upstairs. The sound of a chair scraping across the floor. But I hadn't been upstairs. When I finally gathered the courage to check, I climbed the stairs slowly, my flashlight beam shaking. The rooms were all empty, but in the last room at the end of the hall, the dust on the floor was disturbed. Footprints, bare human footprints leading from the window to the middle of the room, and then stopping. There was no one there. At 2:30 a.m., the front door rattled like someone was trying to get in. I held my breath, standing in the dark, gripping the poker from the fireplace like a weapon. The rattling stopped. Then came the whispering. It was coming from right outside the door, a man's voice, low, pleading. "Let me in." I wanted to run. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to get out of there, but I couldn't move. The whispering stopped after a while, replaced by laughter. Slow, cruel laughter that faded into the night. At 3 a.m., I heard the sound of running footsteps in the hallway upstairs. When I went to check, all the doors were standing open. I was sure I'd closed them earlier. At 4 a.m., I heard the knock again. This time, not just 3, dozens, all around the house, knocking on the doors, the windows, the walls. Whatever it wasn't just one person, it sounded like a crowd. By sunrise, everything went quiet, completely quiet. When Daniel came back later that morning, I told him what happened. He just nodded and said, "You stayed. That's good." "What the hell is this place?" I asked. "Some call it a boundary," he said. "Some call it a gate. Whatever's out there wants in. Your job is to make sure it doesn't." I wanted to quit. I wanted to drive back to town and never look back. But the pay was too good, and I told myself I could do one more night. The second night was worse. This time, I saw them. At midnight, I looked out the upstairs window and saw figures standing at the edge of the clearing. Dozens of them, maybe more, all perfectly still, watching the house. They didn't move. They didn't breathe. At 1 a.m., I heard something inside the house. The sound of wet feet slapping against the floorboards. I followed the sound into the kitchen, where I found a trail of muddy footprints leading to the back door. But the door was still locked. At 2 a.m., the lights flickered. When they came back on, someone was standing at the bottom of the stairs. A man, tall and thin, completely still. His face was hidden in shadow. I didn't move. Neither did he. After what felt like forever, he turned and walked away, vanishing into the dark hallway without a sound. I didn't sleep at all that night. On the third night, the knocking started earlier, right after sunset. I sat in the chair by the fireplace, gripping the poker, trying to ignore it. Then the whispering started again, louder this time, like it was right next to my ear. "You're the only thing keeping us out," the voice said. "You can't stay awake forever." I didn't make it through the whole night. Around 3 a.m., I must have passed out in the chair. When I woke up, the front door was wide open. I don't remember opening it. Daniel was waiting for me outside when the sun came up. He looked at the open door, then at me. "They almost got you," he said. I quit that morning. I left the house, drove back to town, and never returned. But sometimes late at night, I still hear knocking on my apartment door. 3 slow knocks, and I wonder what would happen if I opened it this time. Story No. 3. When I first drove into Harrow's Creek, I thought it was just another quiet American town. Population maybe a few hundred, a single main street with a diner, a gas station, and a handful of shops that all closed at sundown. I was just passing through looking for a cheap place to spend the night before continuing my trip north. The gas station attendant was the first one who acted strange. He was a thin man with yellowed teeth and a permanent smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You just passing through?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, looking for a motel. He stared at me for a long moment before finally saying, "There's one down by the old mill road. Check in before dark." I laughed, thinking he was just trying to scare me. "Why? Does something happen after dark?" His smile faltered. "Just check in," he said, and went back to cleaning the counter. I found the motel easily. The place looked half abandoned, the neon sign buzzing faintly. The woman at the desk didn't ask for my name, just slid me a key and said, "Don't go out after midnight, don't look at the lights if you see them." I almost asked what she meant, but she looked terrified, like even talking about it might get her in trouble. That night I couldn't sleep. Maybe it was the silence. No traffic, no animals, not even wind. Around midnight I heard something outside my window. Soft footsteps. I got up, peeked through the blinds, and saw 3 people standing in the parking lot. They weren't moving, just standing there, staring up at the motel. Each of them held something in their hands. Lanterns maybe, or torches. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The air was freezing. When I looked back at the parking lot, the figures were gone. Then I heard the bell. It was faint, coming from somewhere deep in the woods. A single ringing sound that echoed through the night. The motel door locked behind me with a heavy click. I banged on it, but the desk clerk didn't answer. The bell rang again, this time closer. That's when I saw them. Dozens of figures standing at the tree line, all perfectly still, their faces pale in the moonlight. One of them pointed at me and the others began to move forward in silence. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, just away from the motel, down the road toward the old mill. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop until I saw an old wooden bridge. I ducked underneath it, pressing myself into the mud, trying not to breathe too loudly. The figures passed by slowly, lanterns swinging. Their footsteps were too synchronized, too quiet. I heard them whispering, though I couldn't make out the words. After what felt like forever, they were gone. I waited until the sky began to lighten, then crept back toward the motel. The desk clerk was waiting for me, pale and shaking. "You broke the rules," she said. "What rules?" I asked. "You went out after midnight. You saw them. Now they know you." I tried to leave town that morning, but every road I took brought me back to the same main street. No matter which direction I drove, the gas station would appear again. The same man, the same smile. "You can't leave now," he said. "Not until they're done with you." That night, I barricaded the motel room door and stayed up, clutching the chair like a weapon. Around 2 a.m., the knocking started. Slow, deliberate, on the door, the windows, the walls. Then came the voices. They were right outside, calling my name. Dozens of them. "Come out," they said. "Come join us." I stayed silent, heart hammering. The knocking grew louder until it sounded like the whole building was shaking. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. I thought I had made it through the night, until I turned and saw the motel clerk standing in the corner of my room. "You can't hide forever," she said. Her eyes were completely black. The lantern light flared outside the window, so bright it burned my eyes. When I opened them again, I wasn't in the motel anymore. I was standing in the woods, surrounded by them. The lanterns cast long, twisted shadows across their faces, and I saw then that they weren't entirely human. Their mouths were too wide, their teeth too sharp. The one who had pointed at me before stepped forward. He held out a lantern and said, "Now it's your turn." When I looked down, there was a lantern in my hand too. I don't know how long I've been here. The nights blur together. I follow them into the woods now, holding the light, standing outside the motel when new travelers arrive. Sometimes I hope someone will break the rules like I did, so maybe, just maybe, they can take my place. Story No. 4. I never liked working the night shift, but that Thursday was supposed to be my last. One more night at Miller's Gas and Go, a lonely little station off Route 19 in the middle of nowhere, and I was done. I'd already turned in my notice. I just needed to survive 8 hours, lock up at 6 a.m., and never come back. The night started quiet as usual. A single car passed by around 9, headlights flashing across the windows. After that, nothing but the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the faint buzz of the soda machine. I tried to keep myself busy restocking shelves, counting cigarettes, anything to make time pass faster. Around 11 p.m., the bell above the door rang, but when I looked up, no one was there. The door hadn't even opened. I checked the parking lot. Empty. No cars, no people. I told myself it was just a glitch, maybe a draft triggering the sensor. By midnight, the wind had picked up outside. The station's big windows rattled softly, and the neon open sign buzzed like it was about to die. I was wiping down the counter when I heard something, faint at first, like someone whispering my name. I froze. The sound was coming from the intercom speaker we used to talk to people at the pumps. It crackled once, then went dead. I stepped outside, the cold air biting my skin. The pumps were all off. The lot was still empty. But I felt it. Someone was out there watching me from the dark just beyond the edge of the lights. I hurried back inside, locked the door, and tried to laugh it off. Last night, jitters, I told myself, just finished the shift. At 1 a.m., the security cameras started to glitch. The monitors above the counter flickered, static tearing through the images. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the screen for Pump 3, a man was standing perfectly still, facing the camera. He was tall, wearing an old oil-stained coat, head tilted just slightly like he was listening to something. I looked out the window toward Pump 3. Nothing there. When I turned back to the monitor, he was closer. I shut off the feed. Around 2:30 a.m., a car finally pulled in. It was an old sedan, engine rattling like it might fall apart any second. The driver didn't get out right away, just sat there with the headlights on, pointed straight at the station. After a minute, I stepped to the door and waved. That's when he got out. He was tall, thin, wearing that same oil-stained coat I'd seen on the camera. His face looked wrong, too pale, his eyes too dark, like there wasn't any white in them at all. He walked slowly to the door, never breaking eye contact with me. I didn't unlock it. He stopped just outside, put his hand on the glass and smiled. The smile was wide, too wide. Then he mouthed the words, "You're late." I stumbled back, heart hammering. The lights flickered. When they came back on, he was gone. The car was gone. The lot was empty again. At 3:15, the knocking started, first soft from the back door, then louder from the windows, then from every wall like there were dozens of people outside trying to get in. The power went out. The station went completely dark, except for the glow of the vending machines and the red exit sign. Something moved in the aisles. I grabbed the baseball bat we kept behind the counter and stepped forward, flashlight beam shaking. I caught a glimpse of something crouched between the snack racks. Too tall to be a person, its limbs bent wrong. It scuttled away on all fours, vanishing down the next aisle. I ran back behind the counter, locked myself in the tiny office, and called 911. No signal. The phone crackled with static. Then a voice came through. Not the operator. "You shouldn't have stayed," it said. I pressed myself against the wall, breathing hard. The office door rattled. Slow at first, then harder until I thought it would break off the hinges. I shoved the filing cabinet in front of it, sat down on the floor, and waited. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. I couldn't tell. Just before dawn, everything went silent. When the first light of morning crept through the window, I opened the door. The store looked normal again. The shelves were undisturbed, the windows unbroken, as if nothing had happened. But when I looked outside, there were footprints. Dozens of them, circling the building. Bare human footprints burned black into the concrete like ash. I didn't wait for my replacement to show up. I left the keys on the counter, walked out, and never went back. I heard they found someone else to take the job. I just hope they make it through the night. Story No. 5. I've always been into urban exploration, but spending the night in Hollow Creek Prison was supposed to be my big finale. One last thrill before leaving town for good. The prison had been shut down for over 20 years, abandoned after a riot that killed half the inmates and 3 guards. Locals said it was haunted, cursed, even dangerous to set foot inside. That just made me want to go more. I parked my car near the overgrown access road just as the sun was going down. The main gate was rusted and hanging open, creaking in the wind. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating graffiti, old barbed wire, and shattered windows. The place smelled of rust, mold, and something faintly metallic like dried blood that never washed away. Inside, the silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of my boots on the cracked concrete floor. My plan was simple: explore cell block C, set up my camera, maybe sleep for a couple hours, then leave at sunrise. The first few hours were uneventful. I filmed empty cells, peeling paint, broken bunks. I even sat in one of the solitary confinement rooms for a bit, just to see how it felt. It was cold, claustrophobic. I laughed to myself to keep from freaking out. Around midnight, I heard the first sound that wasn't mine. It was faint, the sound of metal scraping against metal. I followed it down the corridor, past the showers and into the mess hall. The room was pitch black except for the moonlight streaming through the broken windows. That's when I saw it. One of the metal lunch tables was rocking slowly back and forth. I froze, heart hammering. The air suddenly felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest. I backed out of the room, my flashlight flickering. I decided to set up camp in the warden's office upstairs, where I had a better view of the yard. I lay down on my sleeping bag, trying to convince myself it was just the wind moving the table. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Heavy. Too heavy to be an animal. They stopped right outside the office door. I held my breath, staring at the crack under the door. For a moment I thought I saw shadows move, the shape of boots standing just on the other side. Then a voice spoke. "You're not supposed to be here." It was deep, gravelly, almost like a growl. I jumped up, yanked the door open, but the hallway was empty. The next hour was a blur of distant sounds, cell doors clanging shut on their own, water dripping even though the pipes had been dry for years. Low murmurs like men whispering to each other just out of sight. Around 2 a.m., I decided to head toward death row. It was the one part of the prison people said no one should ever go. The hallway leading there was long and narrow, lined with heavy steel doors. My footsteps echoed so loudly it sounded like someone was walking with me. When I reached the final cell, I felt a rush of cold air. The door was half open. Inside, someone had carved words into the wall. Still here. I stepped inside, my flashlight trembling in my hand. That's when I saw him. A man sitting on the bunk, head down, hands folded like he was praying. His clothes were old, a prison jumpsuit so faded it was almost white. "Hello?" I whispered. He lifted his head slowly. His face was pale, hollow-eyed, but very much human. "You shouldn't have come," he said. My blood ran cold. You're alive?" He smiled, a wide, unnatural grin. "Alive? No, not anymore." Before I could react, the door slammed shut behind me. The sound echoed through the entire block. I spun around trying to force it open, but it wouldn't budge. The man stood up, towering over me. "This was my cell," he said. "They left me here. They forgot about me. I've been waiting for someone to take my place." I backed away until my back hit the wall. "This isn't real," I said. "You're not real." He stepped closer, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Stay here," he said. "Keep me company." The temperature dropped so low I could see my breath. The air felt thick like the walls were closing in. The last thing I remember before blacking out was his hand reaching toward me. When I woke up, it was dawn. The cell door was open again. I grabbed my gear and ran out of the prison, not stopping until I reached my car. But when I got home and played back the footage, every frame after midnight was corrupted. Just static and faint whispering. The last clear shot was of me entering the cell. And in the corner of the frame, just for a second, you can see him smiling at the camera. Now some nights I dream of that cell. I wake up to find my bedroom door open, even though I locked it before bed. And sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear that same voice whisper, "You're not supposed to be here." Story No. 6. I'd been staying in my uncle's old cabin in northern Maine for 2 weeks, hoping to get some quiet and clear my head. The place was deep in the woods, an hour from the nearest town, no neighbors for miles. Just a wood stove, a single bedroom, and silence. Exactly what I thought I needed. The first few nights were peaceful. I'd sit on the porch, sip coffee, watch the trees sway in the wind. The forest always sounded alive. Crickets, owls, the distant rustle of deer moving through the brush. But one night everything changed. It was just past midnight when I woke up to absolute silence. Not just quiet. Silence so deep it rang in my ears. No insects, no wind, nothing. Then I heard it. Someone whispered my name from outside. It was faint, almost like the sound of wind slipping through the cracks in the cabin wall, but it was unmistakable. I froze in bed, heart hammering. The whisper came again, a little louder this time, stretched out like whoever was saying it wanted me to answer. I grabbed my flashlight and peeked out the window. The woods were still, the moon casting silver light over the clearing. Probably just my imagination, I told myself. But the next night it happened again. This time it sounded closer. I stayed awake until dawn, listening as the whisper moved slowly around the cabin, circling me. The third night, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps crunching in the leaves. They stopped right outside the bedroom window. I held my breath, staring at the glass, waiting to see a face. Instead, I heard my name, clear, sharp, like someone standing inches away from me. When I finally worked up the courage to check outside in the morning, I found footprints. Bare, human footprints leading from the edge of the forest straight to my cabin. And there were dozens of them. That evening I tried to call my cousin in town to come get me, but my phone was dead, even though I had charged it during the day. The power flickered, the lights dimmed, and for a moment I swore I saw a shadow move across the wall like someone was standing behind me. By midnight, the whispering was constant. Not just my name anymore. Other words, too fast to make out, overlapping like dozens of voices all speaking at once. Then came the knocking. 3 soft knocks on the front door. I didn't answer. 3 more knocks, louder this time. Then, from the back door. Then, from the windows. I sat in the middle of the floor clutching my uncle's hunting rifle, whispering to myself to stay calm. Around 3 a.m., everything went silent again. When I finally looked out the window, I saw them. Figures. Dozens of tall, thin silhouettes standing at the edge of the clearing, perfectly still, watching the cabin. Their faces were pale, featureless, like white masks. One of them raised its hand and pointed toward me. The whispering started again, louder than ever, this time inside my head. My ears rang, my vision blurred, and I felt myself moving toward the door without meaning to. I fought it, forcing myself back, slamming the door shut and barricading it with the table. The figures never moved, just stood there until the first light of dawn. When the sun rose, they were gone, but the footprints were still there. That morning, I packed my things and hiked to the nearest road. I didn't care about the cabin, didn't care about the things I left behind. I stayed with my cousin in town for a few days, but even there I couldn't sleep. Every night, just as I closed my eyes, I'd hear it. Faint, but unmistakable. My name, whispered from somewhere in the dark. I left Maine the next morning. Now I'm back home, hundreds of miles away. But last night I woke up at 3 a.m. and looked out my bedroom window. There were footprints in the snow outside my house. And somewhere out in the dark, the forest was whispering my name again. Story No. 7. When Ethan found the truck, it felt like fate. He'd been searching for months, scrolling through classifieds, visiting junkyards, looking for something cheap but reliable. The red '97 Ford was parked just off a rural highway with a hand-painted for sale sign on the windshield. It looked rough, dents in the doors, rust on the fenders, but it started right up when he turned the key. The old man selling it barely said a word, just nodded and took the cash. Ethan drove it home that evening, proud of his find. The cab smelled faintly of oil and something metallic, like dried blood. He figured it was just old truck smell. The first night he parked it in his driveway, he swore he heard something from outside. A soft thump, like someone had shut a door. He went out to check, but the driveway was empty. The next morning, he found handprints on the inside of the back window. They were small, too small to be his. He tried to scrub them off, but they wouldn't come clean, like they were on the inside of the glass under the surface somehow. The next day, he noticed something carved into the dashboard. Just a single word. Stay. He didn't remember seeing it when he bought the truck. That night, driving home from work on an empty back road, the radio turned on by itself. A low, static hiss filled the cab. Then a faint voice came through. "Why did you take it?" Ethan nearly ran off the road. He shut the radio off, but the voice didn't stop. It came from somewhere behind him, like someone whispering from the truck bed. He pulled over, grabbed the flashlight from the glove box, and stepped out. The bed of the truck was empty. When he shined the light on the rear window, there was a face staring back at him from inside the cab. He dropped the flashlight, heart pounding. When he climbed back in, the face was gone. By the third night, things had escalated. Every time he looked in the rearview mirror, he saw movement in the back seat, a shadow that ducked out of view when he turned around. He started smelling something foul, like rotting meat, and no amount of cleaning got rid of it. He decided to track down the previous owner. When he drove back to where he'd bought the truck, the house was boarded up, abandoned. A neighbor told him the man who lived there had died 3 months ago. Ethan asked about the truck, and the neighbor's expression darkened. "You bought that thing?" the neighbor said. "That truck was found abandoned out by Hollow Creek. They pulled a body out of it, some hitchhiker that went missing last year. Never found out who did it." That night, Ethan woke up to the sound of the truck engine idling in the driveway. He stumbled outside, heart hammering, and saw the headlights were on. No one was inside. He climbed in and turned the key, but the truck wouldn't shut off. The radio came on again, loud this time, and through the static came a scream so sharp and human it made his blood run cold. When it stopped, a man's voice whispered, "Finish what he started." The steering wheel turned by itself, pointing the truck down the road. Ethan stumbled back, falling into the gravel. For a moment, he swore he saw someone sitting in the driver's seat, a gaunt man with sunken eyes, smiling. Then the truck went silent, the headlights clicked off, and the night was still. The next morning, he found muddy footprints leading from the truck to his front door. That night, he dreamed of being inside the cab, locked in, screaming as someone drove him into the woods. When he woke up, his hands were covered in grease, and the keys were in his pocket even though he hadn't touched them. The truck still sits in his driveway, and every night just after 3 a.m., the dome light flickers on and off, like someone is climbing in. Last night, he found a fresh carving on the dashboard, deep enough to splinter the plastic. Leave. But he can't bring himself to get rid of the truck. Something about it feels like it won't let him go. Story No. 8. It started on a Tuesday. I had just moved into my new place, a small rental house at the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it was cheap and quiet, or at least, it was supposed to be. The first night I was woken up at exactly 3 a.m. by a knock at the front door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I lay in bed for a moment, heart pounding, telling myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe a drunk neighbor, maybe kids messing around. But then it happened again. 3 more knocks. I got up, grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed, and crept to the window. The street outside was empty. No cars, no people, just the stillness of the night. When I finally opened the door, there was no one there. The next night it happened again. 3 knocks exactly at 3 a.m. This time I stayed in bed, holding my breath, hoping it would stop. But the knocking continued, slow and patient, until I finally shouted that I was calling the police. The sound stopped instantly. When I checked the porch in the morning, there were footprints leading up to the door. Bare footprints, and there were more than one set, like several people had been standing there together. I called the landlord, asked if anyone had ever complained about trespassers. He got quiet for a moment before saying, "You might want to keep your doors locked at night. That house has history." He wouldn't say more. By the 4th night, I had installed a cheap security camera on the porch. At 3 a.m., the knocking started again. When I checked the camera feed on my phone, my blood went cold. There was someone standing at the door. Tall, thin, completely still, face hidden in shadow. The strange thing was the figure didn't move when they knocked. Their hand stayed perfectly at their side, but the sound echoed through the house. 3 slow knocks. Then the figure turned its head toward the camera. I slammed the phone down, heart hammering. When I watched the footage back in the morning, the porch was empty the entire time. No figure, no movement, but the knocking could be heard loud and clear. The next night, the knocking came from the back door, then from the windows, then from inside the walls. I barely slept. Every sound felt like it was crawling under my skin. The whole house seemed to breathe with me, creaking, shifting, whispering. On the 7th night, I decided to wait for it with the lights off. I sat in the dark living room, bat in hand, watching the front door. At exactly 3 a.m., the knocking started again, but this time, there was a voice. "Let me in." It was soft, almost pleading. I stayed perfectly still. "Let me in," it said again, louder this time. When I didn't answer, the voice started whispering my name, over and over, faster and faster, until it sounded like dozens of voices overlapping, all chanting my name at once. The walls shook, the lights flickered. I ran to the bedroom, slammed the door, and stayed there until dawn. The next morning, I found deep scratches on the inside of the front door, like something had been trying to claw its way in. I packed my things that day, ready to leave, but when I opened the front door, there was a note lying on the porch. It said, in smeared black ink, "See you tonight." I drove to a motel across town and tried to sleep. But at 3 a.m., someone knocked on the motel room door. 3 slow knocks. When I looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. I haven't been back to that house since, but every night, no matter where I sleep, the knocking finds me. And it's getting closer. Story No. 9. It was just past midnight when I left my friend's house, heading home on the long 2-lane highway that cut through the woods. I'd driven that road 100 times before, but that night felt different. The air was heavy, and the moon was hidden behind thick clouds. My headlights were the only light for miles, and my phone showed no signal. For the first 30 minutes, the drive was quiet. No other cars, no deer crossing the road, just the steady hum of my tires on asphalt. I even turned down the radio so I could enjoy the silence. Then, in the distance behind me, I saw headlights. At first, I was relieved. It felt less lonely knowing someone else was out there. But something about those headlights made my stomach twist. They were too bright, too close together. And no matter how fast or slow I drove, they stayed exactly the same distance behind me. I slowed to a crawl. They slowed too. I sped up to nearly 90. They stayed right there, never gaining, never falling back. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I flicked on my blinker and pulled to the shoulder, planning to let them pass. But they didn't pass. The car stopped behind me, maybe 20 feet back, headlights blinding in my mirrors. I sat there for what felt like forever, waiting for the driver to get out. But no one did. Then the lights went out. I was plunged into total darkness, the kind that makes you feel like you're underwater. When I turned my high beams back on, the road behind me was empty. No car, no tire tracks. I was alone again. I told myself I was just tired, just seeing things, but 10 minutes later, the headlights were back, this time in front of me. They appeared out of nowhere, dead center in the road, heading straight for me. I slammed on the brakes, heart hammering, bracing for impact. But just before we would have collided, the lights vanished. There was no car, just the empty road stretching out into darkness. I was shaking so badly I had to pull over again. That's when I noticed something strange. The road surface was wet, like it had just rained, but the sky was clear, and there were footprints, bare, wet footprints leading from the middle of the road into the trees. Against my better judgment, I got out and followed them with my flashlight. The prints led about 30 feet into the woods before stopping suddenly, as if whoever made them had just disappeared. That's when I heard it, the sound of an engine idling. But it wasn't coming from the road, it was coming from deeper in the forest. I killed my light and listened. The sound got louder, closer, until I could almost feel the vibration through the ground. Then just ahead, 2 headlights blinked on. They were suspended in the dark, too high off the ground to belong to a normal car, and they were getting closer. I ran back to my car, jumped in, and floored it. But no matter how fast I drove, the headlights stayed just behind me, bathing the road in blinding white light. The faster I went, the louder the engine sounded, until it was deafening. Then, just like before, the lights went out. I didn't stop until I reached the gas station on the edge of town. I stumbled inside, pale and shaking, and told the clerk what had happened. He stared at me for a long moment before saying quietly, "You saw them, didn't you?" When I asked what he meant, he nodded toward the road. People have been seeing those lights for years. Truckers say it's the ghost of a crash that happened back in the 80s. Driver fell asleep, hit another car head-on. Everyone died. They say the lights chase you until you join them. I laughed nervously, but the sound died in my throat when I looked back outside. 2 headlights were sitting in the darkness just past the gas station waiting for me. And as I watched, they blinked, like eyes. Story No. 10. I was cleaning out the attic of my late grandmother's house when I found the diary. It was tucked in the far corner under a rotting box of quilts, wrapped in brittle brown paper, tied with a faded ribbon. The leather cover was cracked with age, and when I picked it up, a wave of cold air seemed to pass through the room. I should have left it there. But I didn't. I sat down on the dusty floorboards and opened it. The first pages were harmless. A woman's neat handwriting describing daily life in 1954, notes about weather, chores, and neighbors. But halfway through, the tone changed. The writing became frantic, scrawled in uneven lines, ink-smudged and dark. And she wrote about hearing voices in the walls at night, about scratching coming from under the floorboards, about a man she saw standing outside the window watching her, though she lived 10 miles from the nearest neighbor. The final entry was short, just 6 words. "He is in the house now." I shut the diary, heart racing. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old house sounded like footsteps, every gust of wind like whispering. Just after 3 a.m. I heard it, a slow, dragging sound coming from the attic above my room. I told myself it was mice, maybe raccoons, but deep down I knew better. The next day I went back to the attic and searched, but there was nothing there except the diary. When I opened it again, there was a new entry. Written in fresh ink, it said, "Why did you come back?" I dropped the diary and backed toward the stairs. That night, the scratching was louder. I could hear it moving from room to room, following me. At one point, I heard it stop just outside my bedroom door. Then came the whisper. Low, soft, my name spoken slowly, like whoever was saying it was smiling. I stayed awake until morning, clutching the baseball bat I'd found in the closet. By the third night, things got worse. I woke up to find the diary lying open on my chest, even though I'd left it in the attic. The words on the page were moving, shifting, like they were being written right in front of me. Look behind you. I couldn't. I stayed frozen until the sun came up. The next day, I tried to burn the diary in the fireplace. The pages wouldn't catch. They blackened around the edges but refused to burn. When I went to bed that night, the whole house was silent. Too silent. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the lights flickered, then went out. I heard footsteps coming down the attic stairs. Slow, deliberate. They stopped outside my bedroom door. Then the door creaked open on its own. Something moved in the darkness. A tall figure, too thin, with hollow eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. It stepped into the room, and in one long arm, it was holding the diary. You shouldn't have read it, it whispered, voice rattling like dry leaves. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe as it placed the diary on the nightstand and vanished into the dark. When I woke in the morning, I thought maybe I daydreamed it all, until I saw what was written in the diary's latest entry. You're next. I left the house that day, locked the door, and swore I'd never go back. But last night, in my apartment across town, I woke to find the diary lying open on my kitchen table, and this time there was a new message waiting for me. Almost there. Story No. 11. I was halfway through a long road trip across Nevada when I found the motel. It was one of those single-story places off a forgotten stretch of highway, its neon sign flickering weakly against the night sky. I hadn't planned on stopping, but after 10 hours behind the wheel and a storm rolling in, I didn't have much choice. Inside the office, the air smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and dust. The manager was an older man with deep wrinkles and tired eyes, the kind of face that's seen too much. He barely looked up from the newspaper as I asked for a room. We got plenty of rooms, he said, sliding the key across the counter. Just not room 6. I paused, thinking I'd misheard him. What's wrong with room 6? He looked at me then, really looked like he was trying to decide if I was joking. You don't want that room. Nobody stays in there. Take room 3. It's closer to the road. I almost asked again, but the way he stared at me made my stomach knot. I took the key to room 3 and told myself not to think about it, but of course I did. The parking lot was empty except for my car and an old pickup truck parked at the far end. Room 6 was 3 doors down from mine. Its curtains were drawn, but something about the door made me stop and stare. The paint was peeling, the number hanging crooked, and the handle looked newer than the others, like it had been replaced recently. I told myself to ignore it, grabbed a soda from the vending machine and went back to my room. Around midnight, the storm finally hit. Rain hammered the roof, thunder shook the walls, and I couldn't sleep. That's when I heard it, a soft knocking. Not at my door, at room 6. 3 slow knocks, followed by silence. Then again. I looked out the window, but the parking lot was empty. Nobody was standing outside room 6. The next morning, I told the manager what I'd heard. He went pale. You heard knocks? He asked. I nodded. He didn't say anything for a long time, then finally muttered, Guess it's starting again. When I pressed him for answers, he shook his head. You don't want to know. Just leave tonight. Trust me. But I didn't leave. Something about the way he said it made me need to know what was going on. That night, I stayed awake. At 1:13 a.m., I heard the knocking again. This time, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The rain had stopped, but the air was cold and heavy. I walked to room 6, heart pounding, and pressed my ear against the door. Knock, right against the other side of the door. I stumbled back. Then I saw the door handle turn, slowly. I should have run. Instead, I found myself reaching out and pushing the door open. The room smelled of mold and iron. The carpet was torn, the bed stripped, the wallpaper peeling. In the center of the room was an old wooden chair, and sitting in that chair was a man. Or what was left of him. His skin was gray, stretched tight over his bones, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. Then his head turned. Not fast, not jerky. Slowly, deliberately, until his empty eyes were staring right at me. I ran. I didn't stop running until I was back in my room, door locked, chest heaving. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I threw my bag in the car and went to the office to check out. The manager was waiting. "You looked in, didn't you?" he said quietly. I didn't answer. He slid something across the counter, a faded newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Motel guest found dead in room 6. The article said a man had been murdered there 20 years ago. The killer was never caught. As I turned to leave, the manager said almost to himself, "It always starts again when someone opens the door." I drove away without looking back. But last night, 3 states away in my own apartment, I woke to a sound that froze my blood. 3 slow knocks at my bedroom door.